You're listening to the Braver Angels podcast, a new way of talking politics. I'm your host, Nathan Phillips. All right, so welcome everybody to this special episode of the Braver Angels podcast, where we are going to be talking about a subject that is perennially on Americans' minds, and sometimes a lot of us think it should be a lot more deeply on Americans' minds. And we have a guest today who knows a lot about this subject because he works in it, and I'm excited to introduce him in just one second. But first off, I want to make a quick plug. So we're talking about the subject of national service. Part of the reason we're doing this podcast now is because next week, Braver Angels is doing a Coliseum debate on the subject of national service. The resolution is going to be resolved. All Americans have a moral obligation to participate in either a military or a national service program. That's going to be next Thursday, August 19th, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. And we are looking to get a fascinating and interesting conversation out of that. But we're hoping that this podcast and the conversation that my guest and I have here is able to look at some of the initial questions that will probably be discussed in that, and hopefully enlighten the conversation a little bit more. So information to sign up for that will be on the Braver Angels website and in the show notes. And in the meantime, let's get down to business here. So we are joined today by somebody who works in national service in the public sector. His name is Sri Kulkarni. Sri is an administration official working in AmeriCorps nowadays. He is also related to one of my colleagues here in Braver Angels, Silas Kulkarni. And so by a wonderful coincidence, we are able to engage with both somebody who is literally a member of the Braver Angels family, and also somebody who's dedicating his career at this point to helping Americans across all kinds of backdrops have access to national service opportunities. And that's what the conversation is going to be about today. So Sri, welcome to the show.
So thank you so much for having me, Luke. I think this is a very important topic. I hope everybody is excited about national service out there in the audience, and that we can talk more about it wherever you are across the nation.
Sri, we've had some preliminary conversations where you've just got my brain juices flowing on all kinds of interesting questions on this. But I think it would be most fair, I think, for the audience, for you to explain in your own words and describe in your own words why you came to the national service kind of world, how you came to it, what background life experiences brought you to it, and what it's meant to you in some sense. And I have some questions on that too. But let's start with you and why you got into that.
Sure. So how far back do you want me to go, from the beginning?
A little bit after the Big Bang, maybe book of Genesis or so.
So I'm originally from Houston, Texas. On my dad's side, he was an immigrant from India. On my mom's side, actually, our family came to the United States, the earliest ones in the 1600s. In fact, one of my ancestors was John Houston, who came to America from Derry, Ireland, at the beginning of the 1700s. You may know his more famous grandson, Sam Houston. So my great uncle, who the city of Houston was named after. And literally in our family's history, every single generation has participated in some kind of public service, from before the American Revolution all the way through the Civil War to World War II, Vietnam, and then down to me. And I will say, in terms of, why I was interested in this, we would talk about this history of public service in our family. And one of the things that was taught to me early on is that our country wasn't founded by people who agreed on everything. We were founded by people who disagreed very strongly on many things, but they agreed on one thing: that we were stronger as a nation than we were separated. And that means that I care about your interest and you care about mine. Otherwise, we wouldn't be a nation. And so, there's been lots of times in our history where we've had low points in that national unity. Civil War is one of those points, but the 1940s, I would say, is a high point for national unity. and the entire country was supporting the war effort. My grandfather, all of his brothers, all of my grandfather's brothers, every single one of them went out to serve in the war, and they had that sense of national identity and a society and a duty to serve our country. So for me, I was growing up. I went to high school in Texas. I went to the University of Texas at Austin. And then I lost my father at an early age 19 from cancer. I had to take off time from school and come home to take care of him. But when I went back to school, I studied abroad in Russia. And I decided at that point that serving in the foreign service would be a way to serve my country and reduce conflict abroad. So I spent about 14 years overseas in places like Russia, Iraq, Israel, Taiwan, Jamaica. And I would have been serving in the foreign service today, except what I've seen happen over the last few years in our country, this sort of polarization, as you all talk about a lot, the kind of conflict and hostility, it really disturbed me. In fact, after the 2016 presidential election, when there was so much tension in our society, I decided to reach out to a Republican colleague, and we started a group called Breaking Bread. And the goal of this organization was not to debate each other on topics. It was literally just to try and put ourselves in someone else's shoes over a meal. So we would sit down together in a group, and one person would bring up something that concerned them on a personal level, and always try to make it personal. And somebody else would have to restate their concern in other words, not respond to it, but just try to see, did I get you? Do I even understand where you're coming from? Because a lot of times we don't even get to that point. And usually they wouldn't get it right the first time. And so after a couple of these iterations, where you'd ask the first person, do they understand you or not? And they'd usually say, well, they kind of got me, but they maybe had a two-dimensional character of the way that I feel. And then they would try it again. Finally, if the second person said something that the first person really felt like, yeah, you got me, you know where I'm coming from, then you'd open it up to the group to try and address the first person's concerns without violating the second person's values. And even if you don't have a perfect solution, you reframe this as a challenge to the entire group. And I think that's what we need to do in our society right now. Instead of thinking of every problem that we have as us versus them, are you on this side of this issue or that side of this issue? Which color hat are you wearing? How do we frame these as collective national challenges? The way that the war effort was back in the 1940s, that we're all trying to solve together. So the difficulty I had, though, was that at some of these critical points, the Charlottesville Nazi rally being one of those times, I felt like that tension was overcoming that impetus towards national unity. And so that's actually the thing that inspired me to come home from the Foreign Service. And I ran for Congress. And I ran in 2018 and I ran in 2020 back in Texas. And the reason I was coming home is because I felt like if we were at a point where there's actual Nazi rallies and a woman was killed, a woman from my rival high school in Houston was put into the hospital, and these issues are even debatable anymore, then we've kind of crossed all sort of lines of normal political debate, and we've gone into more fundamental issues of what our character is as a society. And so for the next couple of years, I was running for Congress back in Houston. I started out as just one person with no money, no volunteers, but we built up a group of over 1,600 volunteers from that effort. And even when I was in areas where people disagreed with me politically, I remember one time in particular, a guy said to me, he said, "I told you 2 minutes ago that I'm a Republican. Why are you still talking to me?" And I said, because even if you don't vote for me, I've got to represent you. And so I've got to understand what your interests are. And I think that's the kind of attitude that we should all have in public service. And there's more to the story of running, but after I ran for Congress, and then I helped out in the efforts in Georgia through January of this year. Unfortunately, even though we won our election in Georgia on January 5th, on January 6th was another one of these critical moments. It was the attack on the Capitol, the insurrection. And to me, that just highlights that the fabric of our society is still being stretched to the point of breaking, and it's threatening our fundamental democratic institutions. So after the campaign, I said, I want to work in an organization that is actually going to help us to pull our society back together, to try and give us that sense of national unity, that purpose that my grandfather's generation had that maybe we're lacking right now. And so I honestly believe that AmeriCorps, national service, volunteering, this is that institution, or at least one of the institutions that can unify this country, that can pull us back together in a time when these bonds between us have been stretched so thin.
So tell us about what you do in AmeriCorps and what the general kind of status of the AmeriCorps program is in the Biden administration nowadays.
Sure. So my role in AmeriCorps as the Chief of External Affairs is to promote national service and volunteerism. And I need to clarify that AmeriCorps is a government agency. And our mission is to increase volunteerism and national service throughout the country. And so we have multiple different programs, but that is the goal of AmeriCorps. And one of those goals underneath our core mission is to unite the country through service. And so I talk about national service and volunteerism. In fact, we have these days coming up, like 9/11 is one of our national days of service, where we want to make sure that the entire country knows that if they have that desire to serve, if they have that feeling of patriotism, the way that we were all united around, right after 9/11, you will have that opportunity. And so we're making sure that we give people that opportunity to serve, either volunteering, whether it's one big day like 9/11. And by the way, for those of your listeners out there who want to volunteer on 9/11, we're partnering with this amazing organization called 911day.org. And so if you go to 911day.org/volunteer, you can enter in whatever city you live in the United States, and it'll pull up volunteer opportunities for you to serve on 9/11, because we don't want to just look backwards and memorialize people that were lost on 9/11, but we also want to look forwards and say, this is an opportunity for us to recommit ourselves to this country. And if we believe that we are one nation, then put our money where our mouth is. Go out, sign up, serve, at least volunteer for that one day. And then if you want to do other service, if you want to commit to national service, we have many other programs, and I can tell you more about those in detail.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think a lot of the general impression a lot of folks have about AmeriCorps is that it's primarily the Vistas program, right? Where you folks come in and they go work with a very local nonprofit to do some civic and social work in a very local community. But my understanding from some of the things you've told me before is that there's actually a variety of different tracks of AmeriCorps programs, right? So it's not just that there's other ones, and then they work, yes, with local nonprofits, but in a huge variety of different kinds of work, right? So if you could just give us a brief overview of that, and then I think some interesting questions will flow out from there. But if you could give us a brief overview of all those different kinds of internal things, and then we'll talk from there, maybe.
Sure. So AmeriCorps is actually composed of 4 main programs. One of which you mentioned, the VISTA program, was actually started back in the 60s during the War on Poverty. So the goal of VISTA is to increase the capacity of local organizations to reduce poverty. So for example, right now, hunger is a huge issue. If anybody has gone out and volunteered at food banks, the lines this year have been longer than I've ever seen in my life. And I volunteered at these food banks myself. And that's one of the things that we're actually doing on 9/11 day, is we're making sure we're packing meals for people. So VISTA, we place people in these organizations, and they try to increase the capacity of that organization. Then there's another program called NCCC, right? And NCCC was meant to be an update of the Civilian Conservation Corps from the 1930s. And so it's it's an acronym for National Civilian Community Corps, but we usually call it just NCCC. And the way that that is structured, it's teams of young people which are deployed to areas where we have a national need for them. So you could be in West Virginia and then deployed as a team to, for example, Texas for a hurricane, or this year there was a winter storm in Texas. You could be deployed to an area to work on conservation, preventing forest fires, for example, out in the West. You could be deployed as part of a partnership with FEMA called FEMA Corps that does natural disasters. But this year, one of the biggest needs was vaccinations. So we had teams of young people all over the country who were doing mass vaccinations. I went to observe one myself, and I was so impressed with these young people, with not only the service they were doing, but the leadership that they were showing. They were vaccinating about 3,000 people a day in partnership with the Air Force, in partnership with the Coast Guard and the military. So they learn these skills. They gain leadership experience. They network with other people, and it's a comprehensive experience for these young folks that honestly it's hard to give something comparable here at home, at least. And so for a lot of folks, when they're looking at options, either the military or Peace Corps or national service, this is one of those things that allows them to serve their country home here in their community. The largest program by dollars is what's called AmeriCorps State and National. And some people who are more familiar with AmeriCorps, they might remember that was the AmeriCorps brand originally, before we put all of these different programs under one brand. But AmeriCorps State and National works with every single one of our states. And so we have state commissions. So obviously we have red states and we have blue states, but we work with all of them together to try and identify places where local grantees can deploy these members and have the most impact designed for local needs. And so that program is called ASN. And then the last program is different, because all of these other programs that I mentioned, the first three are for members who are usually younger applicants, but the last program is called AmeriCorps Seniors. And so what we call volunteers in the AmeriCorps Seniors program, they actually have multiple options for senior citizens as well. So for example, a foster or a grandparent program, a senior companion program where they assist other senior citizens who may have some limited mobility, for example, or the RSVP program. This is for retired professionals who have skills. For example, professional healthcare workers, retired physicians. This year, we're working together, sometimes together with some of those younger folks in intergenerational vaccine corps, to make sure that people were vaccinated across the country. And actually, the largest group that we have, so we usually have about 50 to 75,000 members who sign up for these tours. But the largest group we have, almost 200,000 seniors. The majority of the people in AmeriCorps are actually in the senior volunteer program. And so there really is a wide variety, but the bottom line is that no matter what age you are, no matter what state you come from, no matter definitely what your political background is or your demographic background, you have an opportunity to serve your nation, addressing some of the greatest challenges right now. And I think that's the thing that's so exciting about this moment for national service.
Well, it's interesting to hear the vast variety of these things as well, because for those who are deeply familiar with 20th century American history and 20th century American government history in particular, it's almost as if the broad variety of things that AmeriCorps kind of works with has like little time capsules to different moments in the past history of national service in the American government. You mentioned the NCCCs, and to be honest, before we started getting this conversation set up, I did not know that there was a living, breathing kind of testament to the Civilian Conservation Corps model, still active, still working with young people all around the country. And so that's a very 1930s idea. Then you get the Vistas, which was literally set up back in the days of John F. Kennedy and Sergeant Shriver and all that kind of time frame. And obviously in the last 40 or 50 years, the structure of American government has changed somewhat, and nonprofits have attained prominence and a reach and expanse that they never really did before that. So there's obviously a deeper thing there. So it's just interesting to see in AmeriCorps the kind of different rhythms across American history and all this. But I would assume that that one of the things that that you guys run into when you're doing recruitment for this as well, right, is questions of why should people do this at a personal level? Why should people take a time out of their lives, either a couple months stint or a year stint or a significant amount of volunteer hours in just their professional careers at a point when they're very young, to go serve their country in these very different ways. And so we can get to some of the idealistic reasons for that. I think that'll be some of the really fascinating part of this conversation. But I think it'd be interesting to just say, like, what are some of the incentives that the system currently uses to help funnel people into this, from education to job training. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a wide variety of reasons why people sign up for national service. But some of the big benefits, like I said, national service, it's a leadership program. It gives you professional development. And so you learn skills in the same way that when people go into the military and they learn different skills in the military that they can apply for the rest of their career. National service in many cases is a pathway to employment. And we have both schools of national service, universities across the country, as well as employers of national service who are committed to giving benefits to people who are alumni of the programs. In addition, you get loan deferment and interest forbearance while you were serving with AmeriCorps. And you also get an education award, a Siegel Education Award. Although some people, some states, I should say, have taken that even farther. Although it's not implemented nationally, there are places like Arizona, like Nebraska, like Maryland, where the state legislatures have decided they want to make such a commitment to national service that they give free in-state tuition to alumni of AmeriCorps, which is a huge benefit. And the one for Nebraska was just signed recently, I think in April. And they also waive income tax on these education awards. So there really are tangible benefits to people for their professional development, for their educational development. But then again, as you said earlier, there's also these intangible benefits, the cohesion of our society. And I think when I hear from young people as well as senior citizens these days, they see these problems around us. And a lot of people feel like, I would like to do something about them, whether it's climate change, whether it's public health in the pandemic, whether it's economic opportunity. They have that burning desire to try and fix something, but they don't know where to turn. And we want to make sure that all of them have that opportunity to serve, whether, like I said, whether it's one day, whether it's a year, whether it's longer than that. And I think national service, it's relatively a newer institution. It's relatively less in the bloodstream of the United States compared to some of our other institutions. But other places around the world, national service is part of that country, and so we're trying to make sure that this becomes one of those foundational institutions in the United States.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned a lot about the war effort in the Second World War as being one of the things that has been foundational to people thinking about why is this an important thing. And obviously, we all know that the GI generation, number one, very justifiably holds a near mythic status in American contemporary self-understanding. And to some degree, maybe every generation since then has measured themselves against the GIs, right? Maybe that's something we of the millennial generation should be thinking on sometimes too. But in some sense, I feel like the question of how do you replicate that kind of shared bonding experience in something short of a major national emergency has been what a lot of folks engaging in like strategic thought about national service have been working in. Now, for what it's worth, there's probably a case that can be made that short of national emergency, like the Great Depression and World War II, there are things that can be like festering at a longer term social level, like social decay, like deep political polarization, like lack of job opportunities and prospects, and the resultant kind of anomie and possibly radicalization that starts to crop out from that. And you could make the argument that in the 2010s and the 2020s, even absent things like the Great Recession and the ongoing polarized politics of our time and the coronavirus pandemic, there's enough things going on that lead to an ongoing kind of sociological crisis that maybe is not as sharp as World War II was, but that still gives you the kind of social kind of decay that something like an old civilian conservation corps or World War II scrap metal collection effort could infuse some energy into, if you could just get the energy for it, right? And I guess one of the big questions that I have is like, aside from just the mere question of like getting people to do the work, and one of our colleagues at Braver Angels, a scholar named Harry Boyd, has done significant work on how there was a significant moral reform element to some of the civilian conservation corps era timeframe stuff. But short of that, like, to what degree is national service as a program something that could fill a strategic and social reconciliation role in American politics, aside from just being something that's good for individuals to do for their own sake?
And by the way, I have to say, thank you to Harry for his service to this country. For those out there, I mean, I think Harry was personal secretary to MLK. So very important in this moment of moral crisis that we had back in the 60s. But to your point, yes, national service can actually serve this role, but it doesn't have to be something that people are necessarily even conscious of. So when you see what happened with the integration of our military, for example, back in that time period, they were committed to a war effort together, but when people worked side by side, it actually had a big impact when people came home. Same thing, with the 1930s, people working side by side across the country on these national projects. I've heard those stories literally happening in the 21st century. One of our employees here, when he was doing his national service, he was serving with somebody on a conservation project, and he had no idea that until into their project that they were completely different, ideologically, politically, opposite ends of the spectrum. But when they're serving in that mission together, they actually start to see each other in a very different lens than especially the way that we see each other on social media right now, where things are designed to be inflammatory and divisive. And, you see somebody across a screen rather than seeing them as a human face to face, which honestly has been difficult during the coronavirus pandemic. But I think that, as you said, strategically, the United States, as a government and us as a society, if we look at national service as a way to cut sideways across these divides, rather than trying to figure out which side of this issue on, because the truth is, for all of these critical issues, if we're trying to solve the coronavirus pandemic, if we're trying to deal with the existential threat of climate change, if we're trying to increase economic opportunity, solve hunger, solve poverty, educational inequities, all of these are challenges to our entire society. And so I think the idea of, like I said, reframing these as collective challenges, putting people side by side and not asking them, do you want to be side by side with somebody else, but literally giving them a task to do together. That's the sort of national identity that we want to form, because that feeling that we are all in this together, that feeling that there is something holding us together as society, I think it is at a low point right now. And so my hope is that by people participating in a mission together, by giving somebody that opportunity to do something that gives them that feeling of accomplishment. If we get past this COVID-19 pandemic together, that's something that we can all be proud of as a society. And it's not a zero-sum game where my win is your loss. We can all win together as a society moving forward. So I see that as the role of national service right now, because we don't have a lot of institutions that have that kind of trust. And when you see people, bipartisan coming across the aisle, because we have support from both sides of the aisle, you see people coming from red states and blue states, you see people of different backgrounds literally side by side. I think that should give us a lot of optimism for the future of our society.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think there's a lot of folks who will give just the national service idea a lot of like backdrop support. Conceptually, they think it's great. And then every time you see like pushes for the expansion of it, then you run into all kinds of other things. But there's a part of me that really hopes that sometime this century, some grand political coup can be figured out whereby there can be some sort of expansion on this sort of thing. And for my part, I mean, I grew up in Boy Scouting. I still volunteer with Scouting sometimes these days. One of the best experiences in my life was working as a trail crew foreman at Philmont Scout Ranch, doing conservation work the summer of 2017. And so that was not national service. That wasn't tied to any particular national program, except in as much as the Boy Scouts of America is like a cultural institution in itself, right? But that being said, the work itself, the work and the social basis of it was just gave me a deeper sense then and has since about like, man, this is something that if you opened up the opportunities to more people who don't have the opportunity to do it, just could be a useful kind of thing, So I don't know. Just that does bring me to another question too, though. I know AmeriCorps works pretty closely with a lot of civil society organizations and nonprofits and local foundations and stuff like that. I would assume that the space of organizations that provide this kind of opportunity is much bigger than any one of the organizations or any one of the coalitions of organizations promoting this, right? And so just at a conceptual level, I guess like it opens up fascinating questions about like, how do you promote this, not from a top-down kind of way, but also from a way that like lets the entrepreneurs and the leaders coming from the ground up push for new things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, you say, the Boy Scouts is not national service, but honestly, I was a Cub Scout too at one point. The idea of civic engagement really does start at a very early age. And if we're going to revitalize our democracy, it's not just people later on, in their 20s. I mean, we want to work with high school students, younger volunteers, give them all that opportunity. And then, later on, they may end up serving, but it's part of the lifeblood of our society. And so I don't think you're ever too young to start working on some of these projects that actually help in your community. In terms of local organizations, I mean, that's sort of the model that we work with. So we don't do everything top down at this agency. In fact, we're looking for local organizations to be able to identify those problems, and then we will try to give the resource that we need, and especially place the members that need to serve in those communities. But local organizations are best positioned to say whether it's hunger, whether it's education, whether it's poverty, whether it's public health there. And within our grant program, there's many funding opportunities. So I would say if there is a local organization out there, if you're part of a nonprofit, also go to our website and look for those funding opportunities, because we have lots of notices of funding opportunities, and we're getting new ones all the time. We're starting a new public health AmeriCorps, for example, a partnership with the CDC. We've got literally projects in every single state around the country, and we want to increase the diversity of our applicant pool as well for those grants. So if you have not looked into AmeriCorps as a possible funding source, please look at those opportunities, because at the end of the day, this depends on trust in the community. Right. And what we're talking about is giving people that chance to say, I want to serve. I want to serve my country. But serving your country doesn't necessarily mean going overseas to Iraq or Afghanistan. Serving your country can be serving in Wisconsin or Texas or, or Baltimore, or Oakland, or wherever your community is across the United States. John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Well, we're saying, ask what you can do for your community, what you can do for your community today. And so that applies to organizations who are applying for grants right now. Please come to us. And it applies to individuals right now of any age. Like I said, from teenagers all the way up to senior citizens. How can you serve in your community? And you know your community the best. Let's give you that opportunity to serve.
That brings to that actually segues pretty nicely to another interesting question too. So you mentioned a little bit there's military service, right? And then there's the kinds of things that AmeriCorps does, and within AmeriCorps there's both the kind of like core style things that the NCCC does, going out, building berms, fighting wildfires, building trails, and then there's the kind of local nonprofit work, and then aside from those, you mentioned public health corps. There's probably also Teach for AmeriCorps, and then Teach for America, and then you had mentioned as well the public health corps that's being set up right now, which is just a really cool idea. And so it's interesting because the wonderful thing about this model, the wonderful thing about all this is that it just opens up so many different kinds of work, right? And so many different kinds of opportunities, and the people have very different kind of understandings of what they're trying to do. Now, I guess a question I have for you is you've said a couple times that part of AmeriCorps' mission is to engage more volunteers, right? And I know there are full-time programs in national service, and then there are obviously like with volunteers, people don't do that full-time; they just do it on the side. What does the scaling of that look like? Like, what is the general reach of those look like, and to what degree is an expansion of like working with volunteers something that is just done on a different level than the recruitment of people to do full-time 1 year or 2 year stints?
Sure. So what we want to do is make sure that no matter how much time you have available, where you are on that user journey, you have an opportunity. So if you can serve in 1 day, come out with us, come out on 9/11. As I mentioned before, go to that website, 911day.org/volunteer, and you will find an opportunity to serve on that 1 day. But if you're out there, say you're recent college graduate, or you're looking for some kind of service opportunity right now, go to our website right now. You can check out AmeriCorps.gov, AmeriCorps.gov/serve, and you can find out all of the opportunities. For example, with NCCC, there's the traditional 10 to 11 months, but there's also the FEMA Corps program. You can serve as just a member, or you can apply to be a leader of a team. You can apply for the VISTA program, and then you will be placed as an individual probably within one of these organizations working on things like hunger. Right now, we're working with the organization Head Start, for example, on getting people to apply for the child tax credit. That's something that deeply impacts many families across the country. And so there's so many different opportunities from 1 day to 1 year or longer. If you're not sure what kind of opportunity you want to serve in, or whether you want to serve, you can go and actually look on the AmeriCorps website and just learn about the different areas that we serve in as well, because we have a lot of different priorities, and I've mentioned some of them here. But if you go to AmeriCorps.gov/priorities, you can see all of them listed out there, and you can read up a little bit more, because honestly, every single national priority that we have, every single priority of the Biden administration, there is an opportunity in national service to try and address that priority. So AmeriCorps.gov/priorities, you can find the issue that you care about most. If you are passionate about climate change or conservation work, there's an opportunity for you. If you're passionate about teaching, you mentioned Teach for America, which is actually a grantee of AmeriCorps. So every Teach for America alum is actually an alum of the AmeriCorps program as well. That's where they get their education awards funded from. If you care about poverty, if you care about economic opportunity or racial equity, all of these issues, we are dealing with them right now. And so I think bottom line is whatever your interest is, as long as you care about serving, we're going to give you that chance.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me, and it's just wonderful how broad the opportunities are there as well too. So actually, maybe I should go look into this later on. So, well, anyways,
absolutely, and everybody, literally everybody can serve on 9/11. So make sure if you care about this country, I would say go out, make sure you do a day of volunteering this year. In memory of those that we lost 20 years ago.
Well, and this coming 9/11 is the 20th anniversary of that year of that day that changed so much in so many American lives, right? And so I think it'll be an interesting time for both reflection and forward looking, but those are always helped out by the action of service. Well done too. So
absolutely. And as we memorialize these families, I don't know how old you were on 9/11, but I remember that day very strongly. And the feeling that we had afterwards, it wasn't just national union. In fact, the whole world was with the United States. So I think we can get back to that place where we are all together. When we face a national crisis, you mentioned the 1930s, we had dual crises that time. An economic crisis, the Great Depression, but you also had ecological crises, right? We have the same sort of situation right now, multiple crises. We have the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the climate change crisis, and we can solve all of these together and increase national unity simultaneously if we redirect our energy in the right way, and that's towards serving others.
To answer your question, I was quite young on that day. I was, I think, 8 years old, and we were living in Norfolk, Virginia. Shortly after that, my dad shipped out to serve in Operation Enduring Freedom in the Indian Ocean. And so for my family, that was a really deep time for a lot of just like thinking about what we are in America and thinking about where America is in the world. One of my great
thank your father for his service, by the way, and for everybody who served, and of course the memories of the families who lost loved ones that day. I had multiple relatives in New York that day, and to me this is about figuring out how do we best honor their memory. What is the best way that we as a nation can say that we will never forget what happened on 9/11?
And it goes to a fascinating way in which we are inseparably connected to our own heritage, our own past. And there's a way in which I think these kinds of public things we're talking about here are very concrete ways to engage in that. And so I guess I want to segue to a last major topic of this conversation, if that's okay, Sri.
Sure.
You've mentioned many times and in many different ways that the reason national service is a good thing is not really just because it gets people a good job opportunity or helps with that, and it's not really even just because it helps provide extra service power and person power for projects that need to get done and are good to get done, but that a real reason for promoting national service and wanting to expand it is the kind of formation of citizens and the formation of citizens as well into people who can better understand each other and in a longer term sense promote national unity, national advancement, deeper discover the roots of what brings us together as Americans, right? And so I was wondering if you could just take a few minutes and like articulate your vision of how that works, how the process of somebody going into any AmeriCorps program or any national service program, how in their life, like the ways serving can bring them to a higher understanding of what it means to be an American and treat their fellow Americans better and fight for this country in ways that we all have to do all the time, right? Could you articulate your mechanism of that, I guess?
Sure, and just to go back to the point about Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts and where does this start? I started volunteering when I was a student. In high school I was part of something called Key Club. So I organized volunteer service for all of the high schools around the Houston area, and we would do conservation projects. We would feed the homeless, et cetera. And I think that experience of serving is something that people have to feel for themselves. It's not enough just to talk about it. It's a good concept out there, but having that feeling of doing something for someone else's benefit, for caring about others. And I think when we have these huge problems, so the pandemic is a great example. It's not an individual problem. You're not going to solve the pandemic by yourself. I'm not going to solve the pandemic by myself. It actually requires all of us getting vaccinated, wearing masks, when we need to, and making sure that we are actually doing more than just protecting ourselves, but we're actually thinking about other people. That has a profound impact on each one of us individually and all of us collectively. And so I think when people sign up for a day of volunteering, or when people sign up for a project like this, they don't know what they're going to feel like. They don't know what that sense of camaraderie, that sense of patriotism even is going to be like at the end, because it's experiential, right? And so whether you're serving out in a forest, whether you're building these bike trails or fire breaks, or whether you're serving in an urban area, whether you're teaching in a classroom, for example, and an urban community, no matter what the project that you're working on, at the end of it, you have a very different sense of your connection to the people within your community, but then also getting that sense of connection to people across the country. Sometimes we feel disconnected, when we've all been sitting in our houses, especially over the last year. We lose that feeling of connection that we have to the people in our society. It's the thing that people have been yearning for the most. And when you have that sense that something is lacking in our society, we're looking for those opportunities. This is what we're trying to provide with national service and volunteering. We're trying to fill that gap when people know that there is a lack of connection. People know that our communities need to be stronger. People know that we have huge challenges right now. But that feeling when you actually can say, I accomplished that. I did something about education in my community. I did something to reduce hunger in my community. I did something to reduce poverty. That's a feeling that stays with people the rest of their life. And I can't tell you the number of stories I've heard from people about how AmeriCorps changed their life, their entire perspective on the world. Some people they've gotten tattoos of AmeriCorps logos on themselves. They still stay connected with alumni the rest of their life. Some of them go on to careers in service with the agency. It's so powerful. It's so transformative. And honestly, it's very hard to capture in words what that experience is like. I think you just have to feel it for yourself. So again, for those out there who have any interest whatsoever, I mean, all of these things that we're talking about that you care about as an individual, figure out how much you're willing to do. Are you willing to take a day, or are you willing to make a longer commitment? But I guarantee you that it will be worth it in the end, because I've seen the stories of the people that come out of it, and that feeling of patriotism, that feeling that we're all in this together. I see it on people's faces every single day.
I get the sense that there are political and social divides in this country that are not now about to be, and maybe probably never will be, like fully resolved or fully bridged. But it seems as well that there's a kind of mechanism in participation in things like these for people at a young age that like makes it possible for those divisions to exist, but not to matter as much for those who've learned to work alongside people in those kinds of things. Am I right?
No, absolutely. I think if you're looking for a way to divide, you can always find it. What we're trying to do is give people a different kind of outlet. Here's a mission where it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what state you come from. It doesn't matter whether you're red or blue. What matters is, do you have that concern for someone else? Are you willing to give a little bit of your time, give a little bit of yourself for the betterment of your community and your country? And so to me, that idea of service to one's country, it comes back to us. It gets paid back in interest. We talked about the benefits earlier, the tangible financial benefits, the educational benefits, but the feeling of goodwill that's created between people across our society, that's something that really can't be measured. But like I said, you can see it when you go out and visit people. I mean, as we start to open up from the pandemic, hopefully people will see this more and as they participate in these projects. But I see it for sure when I've gone to visit some of these projects where people really are they're gaining back more than they're giving to national service, and I think it's something that we can all be really proud of.
Well, Harry Boyd has mentioned some things about trying to help citizenship be something more of a partaker rather than a consumer, right? And I don't know, at some level, there's just this wonderful old ideal of the American citizen, right, where you're not just a consumer, you're not just a voter, you're not just a worker, even though you are all those things, but you're also somebody who can be a participant, can be even a leader in things that you yourself have helped organize and in things that you yourself are helping lead, right? And so there's just always been a part of me that thinks like, wow, to the degree that the different kinds of civil society organizations around this country and the different kinds of service programs around this country can give people an opportunity to do that, that is probably a way to expedite that process of helping people find deeper versions of what they can be as an American citizen too. So
absolutely, and I will say this, we all serve in different roles at different times. In some aspects of our life, we may be a leader. In some aspects, we may be a follower. And I think national service gives us that opportunity to shift roles a little bit. If you grew up in a certain neighborhood or went to a certain school or did a certain type of job, and you get put into a different role. Like I said, there's opportunities to lead and to follow and to realize that every single one of those roles is critically important to us solving this challenge. And honestly, it's very humbling. It's humbling to me to see the power of people coming together to solve one of these problems, because it's not something that any individual can solve by themselves. Most of these things, the pandemic is the most salient example. It literally takes all of us working together. We are in a time of national crisis right now. I mean, I get what you were saying earlier about, sometimes you may not be in one of those times of national crisis, and we have to find ways to motivate people. Well, we literally are in one of those times of national crisis. We have to get past this pandemic together. But when I see the effort that people are putting in every single day to try and get us past it, it does give me more optimism about the future of our country than I may have had a few years ago.
Do you remember the Starship Troopers movie from like the 90s, the really bad CGI?
I do remember Starship Troopers. I'm wondering where you're going with this.
Well, I remember there, and obviously Starship Troopers was like just a very brilliantly done parody of a certain kind of like jingoism and stuff like that. But they had a mantra that was repeated through it a lot during the propaganda flicks that was like service means citizenship, I think, or something along those lines. And there's a part of me like whenever I think about this kind of thing, that's like, yes, but also unironically and in the most wholesome way possible. Like there's a way in which doing good work for the sake of doing it is not something that you'll always be thanked for, right? It's not always something that will always come attached with benefits. It's something that just should be done, and it's admirable when people do it. But there's a way in which like that kind of idealistic desire to do that is one of the things that, not in the Starship Trooper sense, but in the AmeriCorps kind of sense, in the Boy Scout kind of sense, is one of the things that I think is gives me hope too, Sri, about the future of the American people. So, so I don't know, it should be interesting.
I mean, I will say, my dad, as an immigrant coming to this country, he always taught me that the most unique thing about the United States, it's not that we have the largest population in the world. We don't. It's not that we have the largest landmass in the world. We don't. It's that we have millions of people who've come here from every corner of the earth. And it's not our ethnicity or our faith or our race or our gender that defines us as Americans. It's that we buy into an idea of what it is to be an American. And that's a pretty revolutionary concept in the history of the world. And so if we're all committed to this idea of American democracy, what are we going to do to reinvigorate it? That's a question that we should all be asking ourselves. Like, what does it mean to be an American? And for me, part of what it means to be American is to say, I am committed to this ideal of us from different backgrounds working together, to a pluralistic democracy, people of all backgrounds actually concerned for each other regardless of where they came from. And the best way I think to show that is to put your blood and sweat into it. And it doesn't have to be fighting bugs like in Starship Troopers. It could be fighting a virus together. It could be fighting climate change together, or it could be fighting hunger together. But regardless of that, I do agree with you that we have to give people something physical to do to make that conceptual idea real to them. But if that idea of America really means something the way it did back in 1776, then we should see it out in the streets. We should see it in our communities. We should see it all over this country.
And maybe not just 1776, but also, the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1960s, and every decade and generation that Americans came together to do great things. So, well, Sri, I certainly have learned a lot in this conversation. This has just been intellectually interesting to me because I'm an American citizen who doesn't always know what programs my government is doing. And so it's just very helpful to find out some of that on very interesting topics like this. I hope this conversation, I have faith that this conversation has been equally useful to a lot of the Braver Angels audience listening to it, and will be useful for those going into the debate next Thursday as well. But Sri, let me just thank you on my own part on behalf of Braver Angels, because this is a kind of a policy area, more explicitly kind of like a social thought area and political kind of prospects area that I just think is fascinating to think about. And I want to be thinking about this more over the coming years. And so I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to share your thoughts with me. I want to thank you for the work that y'all are doing, literally pulling people together, because that is one of our core goals at AmeriCorps, is to unite the country through service. So thank you, the entire Braver Angels network, and to all of the listeners out there. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Again, if you want to learn more about these opportunities, please do research. If you want to serve, go to AmeriCorps.gov/serve and find your opportunity. If you want to just read more, go to AmeriCorps.gov/priorities. And everyone out there, every single person, that includes you, Luke, that includes me, everybody can go to 911day.org/volunteer and find an opportunity to volunteer in your neighborhood on 9/11 this year. Thank you, Sri. It has been a pleasure having you on the show, and I will definitely go on to 911day.org after this to take a look at what's possible there too. Meantime, everybody from the Braver Angels audience and everybody listening to us from outside our community, but soon to be in our community, I just want to reiterate that the Braver Angels podcast brings in guests from a variety of places along the political spectrum and a variety of places around American society to talk about issues of great importance to American life and pioneer new ways to talk about them on this program. And so we're honored that you're still listening to us, and honored that you're tuning in with us whenever we do these. So just a quick note again, the Braver Angels debate on national service will be held next Thursday, August 19th, 2021, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. Sign up link should be on the website and in the show notes, and we will look forward to seeing some of you there. I hope that some of the things said in this conversation will have been helpful for that. So, but in the meantime, thank you, Sri, for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for listening in. May we all go forth to serve our country in whatever ways work best and whatever ways we can best contribute. And in the meantime, you've been listening to the Braver Angels podcast, a new way of talking politics. Thank you for joining us, everyone.